Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayana Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Yaya Udiyaret. Keep going. Nashtaprayashu Vadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunnavad Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Adaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'm very fortunate to be back here due to the request of Vinod Kovid Prabhu. I don't know where he is. For some time, I thought he got his initiated name after COVID started. But then he corrected me and said, no, it was actually before COVID. So his name has nothing to do with what's going on outside. And I asked him, what verse should I speak on? And he said, whatever you want. I said, okay. So I didn't pick a verse, but I wanted to go back to the preface of the Srimad Bhagavatam and speak on the theme, which is, you going to remember this? Real revolution begins within. Can I hear that one more?
Real revolution begins within.
So by the time we finish this class today, and you know, most of my life I've been a college professor, and this Bhagavatam class is not the format I teach in. But I'm going to try and blend what I can, okay? And by the time we leave this room today, we would have something to reflect through the rest of the day. That's the purpose of this class. We're going to understand what is Krishna consciousness, why is it a revolution, and why Real revolution begins within. Am I clear so far? Clear so far? Okay. I want to transport all of us back, and we're going to do a little imagination exercise. You've danced enough. It's still time for breakfast. The song Jai Radha Madhava was meant to kind of settle us down into a calmer attitude and calmer state of mind. So we're going to try this little thought exercise, okay? This thought exercise includes imagining certain things, but it'll help us put this little passage we're going to read today in context, okay? Imagine for a second that you were born in a country where your ancestors and the others who has maintained your civilization for hundreds and thousands of years through regime changes, through various political arrangements of the powerful elite, you and your culture has survived. But suddenly, in your generation, everything that you stood for, everything that you valued, most importantly, your freedom is under question. Okay? Imagine if a small country like Singapore controlled Canada because it had purchased over all of the resources of Canada. A small group of people in Singapore sat and decided what Canada is going to grow, what Canada is going to sell, and what Canadians are going to eat, what kind of movies they're going to watch, how their children are going to be educated, and Canadians had no say in that. Would you like to be a Canadian like that? Okay. The author of this little piece was born in a similar situation. A small country called England ruled over what was one of the most wealthy portions of planet Earth, what we today call South Asia. But in 1896, it was called Hindustan. Hindu means anybody who lives on the other side of a river called Indus. The people of the land called a large body of water Sindhu. A river was a Sindhu. But the people on the other side of the river couldn't pronounce the word S. They called it Ha. So whatever was S on the east was H on the west. So what was Sindhu on the east was Hindu from the perspective of those who came from outside. Okay? Now, Hindu isn't or wasn't a religion. It was the name of a group of people who lived on the other side of the Sindhu River. The people from the land called it Sindhu, the Chinese called it Shintoi, the Greeks called it Indus, and the Persians called it Hindu. Okay? And 350 million people, about 1896, were under British subjugation. It was 20 years before the people of this land would get dragged into a war they had nothing to do with, the First World War. Forget everything you know about Prabhupada. Let's start thinking about a young man in Calcutta, born in 1896, when Indians are suddenly beginning to realize the raw deal they have gotten themselves into because the British had promised them jobs, good economy, and now this is what's happening. In India, it is illegal for Indians to walk on their 2 feet in front of a British gentleman. You have to crawl on the street because you have to give them honor. You are not supposed to grow salt in your own country. The production of salt, a basic commodity you need for your everyday sustenance, is decided by the British government. You're not allowed to make needles. The cotton that you make gets exported to Lancaster to build clothes, and then those are sold back to the Indians at 10 times the value. Like the African slave trade that happened from the 1600s on, did you know there were Indians who were turned into slaves and taken to Africa? You know that? Like Africans were made slaves and brought to America because the slave traders and the government thought if you remove people so far away from their home that they can never go back, you have full control over their lives. And so they brought the South Africans to America, and they brought the Indians to South Africa as slaves. Imagine people in your country getting enslaved day after day after day to go and work in a foreign land where they're growing cotton and sugarcane, which is being sold to a group of people in England, which then decide how they're going to sell it across the world to make the best profit possible, because the sun never set on the British Empire. It was a huge thing back then. But here's what was happening on the ground. The British would decide that this amount of grain that are grown by these people should be put in ships outside the country in case the armies needed food. And the people who grew them had no control over the food that they grew. And when there was any kind of a political turmoil because of a lack of food, lack of resources, the British would sink their own ships so that the Indians starve. And in the middle of all of that was born Abhay Charan De. Deep in the middle of the British Empire. When he is 20 years old, about your age, right? Most people here are about 18 to 21, 22, some are older. About 20 years of age, opportunities around him begin to crumble because the First World War has broken out. It's a war being fought by Britain and Western powers. India has nothing to do with it. But because it is a British colony, Indians have to volunteer to go to a British war. They're drafted. If you go to London today and you go and see the series and series and series of tombs from the First and Second World War, I guarantee you'd see most of Indian names there. Their names have been wiped off from history books. This was the context in which Srila Prabhupada was born. Within a very short span of time, 1916 to 1939, how many years is that? When he is older, now he has 7 children. Second World War breaks out. His business fails. There is a recession. Imagine being a dad to 7 children, living in the middle of a recession. I have personally met people in Kolkata who was there during with Srila Prabhupada during that time. I've heard from one disciple, from interview of a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who was a lawyer, that Srila Prabhupada used to go to his house with his 7 children to get 1 meal a day. He couldn't afford food. 1 meal a day with 7 children. They're crying out of hunger. Right? It wasn't easy. And in the middle of the war, and the war didn't seem to end, 1939 came and went. 1940 came and went. Hitler, Mussolini, they were getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they were controlling people's lives. They were bombing London like crazy. And Srila Prabhupada says that when they started bombing Calcutta, I didn't know what to do. Any moment could have been my last moment. So I practiced Sharanagati And I was frying kachoris for Radha Govinda. Because I didn't know what else to do. There's nowhere to escape. They're bombing my city. I have 7 children. One of them has gone crazy. Imagine having 7 children and one of them goes crazy, and then you hear one day they're loitering in the streets. They are not able to recognize you and your family, right? While you're scampering to make ends meet. And your closest group of friends, which are his godbrothers and godsisters in the Gaudiya Math, were fighting lawsuits against one another. So what he saw is wholesale conflict around the world. Are we seeing that today? Wholesale conflict around the world. And he is trying to address this conflict and find a path to peace with what he's writing there. Does this make sense now? Imagine a Calcutta where you have black town and white town. The white town is run by the British and the black town is where the Indians live. My grandfather, who grew up between 1924 till 1997, so a generation after Prabhupada, told me that there is a market called the New Market in Calcutta, and Indians were not allowed. People of color were not allowed in a market in their own city. Do you realize? We think about apartheid in South Africa. My friends, there was apartheid in India. And just a generation earlier, when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a deputy magistrate in 1885, there was a law that was passed by the British government saying that Indian judges can judge over British people, because there was a lot of hue and cry in India which said, where people protested, British people in India protested, saying that brown people don't have the moral right to judge white criminals. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a judge when that law got passed, and he was busy writing articles to calm nerves down. Right? So the acharyas you see on the altar here, each of them are revolutionaries that lived through the period of 1850s to 1950s, who saw a tremendous amount of change happening on planet Earth, just like we are today. Do you see what I'm saying? And that is the context of the passage to the preface of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Could we have the preface back? One must understand the present need of human society, or we must know the present need of human society. And what is that need? Now, that sentence doesn't necessarily tell you that this person has just lived through 2 wars. He's lost everything. He's struggling to feed his children. His business has failed. He thought he would retire and started a retreat center of sorts. And the governor's wife swept down on him, took the real estate away. He had no home, no money, nothing to fall back on. All he had was a manuscript of the Bhagavad Gita, which got sold, by the way, to buy tea. And he didn't have a book left. So everything he ever worked for all good purposes, was gone. And he had joined Mahatma Gandhi because Gandhi had promised that independence in India could be achieved by peaceful, non-violent resistance. If 350 million Indians stop cooperating with the 300,000 British officers, there is no way they can run a country. And so Prabhupada joined that movement. Right? Because you grow up in a situation where you have no opportunities, you suddenly see that the basic dignity of life is not there. You want to get freedom back for your country. You want to live a free life and hold your head high and be an equal citizen of the British Empire, right? Imagine if the American Empire today said that half of the population, or the population that we control, are second-class citizens just because they've been born as second-class citizens. Is that fair? But that was happening. So he joined the movement of Mahatma Gandhi, practicing civil disobedience, going out in rallies on the streets. I don't think anybody here has ever been on a political rally. Have you? Anybody here on a political rally? Oh, a few have. Welcome to the club. His closest friend was a member of the political opposition to the party that he had joined. His classmate, a senior classmate, was Subhash Chandra Bose, who was a firebrand, who said, I don't believe in an India that is ruled by exploiters, whether it's British or the brown British, whoever it may be. And all these people, before Srila Prabhupada, who were educated, who were in tune with their culture, fell back on the book called Srimad Bhagavatam to give them the inspiration to create a revolution, to have a free country. Tadvaga visargo yanataga viplavo yasmin prati shloke. Every verse of this book has the potential to cause a human revolution. And so Subhash Chandra Bose's guru, Chittaranjan Das, and I just wrote an academic article on him, was one of the founding fathers of India. He went back to the Vaishnavism of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to create a movement where you do not react to the British with bullets if they fire at you, but with a love song on your lips. And you know what that love song is? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. We sing this, we don't understand what this mantra meant to a lot of people. But I'll get to it. By the time it is 1944, the Second World War is at its peak. You cannot buy paper in India. Paper is the last concern on people's minds. And Srila Prabhupada was going to his friends, feeding his 7 children at his friends, and then coming back, gathering whatever paper he could to write the articles of Back to Godhead magazine. What does Back to Godhead mean? The problems that we face in the world cannot be solved at the level at which they were created. It is impossible to do that. If there is hunger, you cannot just export food and solve that problem. You can do it temporarily, but it's not a sustainable solution. Back to Godhead means revolutions begin within. If you first don't start the revolution within your heart with the 4 principles of dharma to which Sri Krishna himself gave his life. Satya, and this is in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 17th chapter. Satya, which means integrity, truth, honesty. Shaucha, which is cleanliness, hygiene, purity. Tapa means endurance, enterprise, austerity. And daya means compassion, kindness, empathy. Right? So these 4 principles are the 4 legs of the bull of dharma. Whenever these 4 legs are compromised, there is wide-scale quarrel in society. Whenever these 4 legs are maintained, there is peace and prosperity. And if you look at every single avatar, whenever they appeared, peace and prosperity came back to the planet. That is the symptom. That they put spirituality at the center and then the rest of it follows. That is where revolution begins within. Right? Human society is no longer bounded by geographical limits to particular countries or communities. Can we agree with that? It is broader than in the Middle Ages, and the world tendency is towards one state or one human society. Now, when this was written, the internet was not there. But he is already talking about the tendency. He knows that this tendency is going to continue. The ideals of spiritual communism, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, are based more or less on the oneness of the entire human society, nay, the entire energy of living beings. We're not talking about humans here. We're talking about the lizards that live in Florida, the dogs and the cats, the homeless, the sick, the elderly, the women who are exploited, children, the victims of war, everybody. Right? And this Krishna consciousness movement is supposed to cater to every form of life. And this is the foundation, which is there are the weakest links of life that Vaishnavas must protect. And who is a Vaishnava? Vishnu means one who preserves everything. Vaishnavas are servants of those who preserve, servants of that one who preserves. So Vaishnavas are meant to preserve everything, protect the world. That's a Vaishnava. And what do Vaishnavas do? They understand the symptoms of the disease and they offer medicine to that, and Srimad Bhagavatam is that medicine. And how does it work? We are thinking about the collectivity of life itself on this planet. So much bigger than human society, much bigger than world economy. We are talking about all forms of life, including amoebas. Okay? And Srimad Bhagavatam will fill this need in human society. It begins therefore with the aphorism of Vedanta philosophy, Janmadya Seyataha, that from which everything else arises, to establish the idea of a common cause. Okay? Conflicts happen because we can't find a common cause. People become enemies when they don't have something bigger than themselves to cooperate for. But when we have the collectivity of life on this entire planet at stake, that is a good enough reason for all different kinds of oppositions to unite, to serve for a common cause. And this is why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur named his periodical The Harmonist. We can harmonize any conflicting views to serve the purpose of Bhagavan Sri Krishna given in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this book, my friends, by the gold standard of all learned acharyas of our country means I'm talking about India, I'm still psychologically there, is the constitution of planet Earth. This constitution here in this country doesn't have a Bill of Rights for animals. Does it? Doesn't have a Bill of Rights beyond the little community that they can imagine. Srimad Bhagavatam imagines the collectivity of all forms of life on planet Earth as one community. Vasudha eva kutumbakam. Vasudha means the whole world indeed is one family. Srimad Bhagavatam starts from that point. Human society at present moment is not in the darkness of oblivion. It has made rapid progress in the fields of material comforts, education, and economic development throughout the entire world. Can we agree with that? Our economy is working well. We have luxuries that our grandparents couldn't imagine. Right? We have everything we need. We have the whole world in our palm. But there is a pinprick somewhere in this social body at large, and therefore there are large-scale quarrels even over less important issues, says a man who's living through a war. Because by the time he's writing this, another war has started. India-Pakistan is fighting for the last almost 2 decades. They thought the Second World War happened to end all other wars. And it didn't happen. They were back at fighting. The white rulers left, the brown rulers took their place, the same madness continued. And among all the people that he had met in his life, only one person could predict that would happen. That was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. That when your British rulers will leave, even if you do your Gandhi movement, new people will come in and they will do this because the principle is exploitation. You will replace the white British with the brown British. So there is a need of a clue as to how humanity can become one in peace, friendship, and prosperity with a common cause. Let's drill that sentence in our head. How can we become one in peace, in friendship, and in prosperity with a common cause. Okay, that's what we are trying to get, right? Srimad Bhagavatam will fill this need. The problem that you see around there, this is the book that can solve that problem. And that's why instead of going to fight in a war, instead of joining Mahatma Gandhi, instead of writing articles about Subhash Chandra Bose, Srila Prabhupada sits down to write the Srimad Bhagavatam as an antidote, as a medicine to the large-scale quarrels that we experience every day. The Russian-Ukraine war is going on. Why is this happening? Because of this. We have become great in economic development, in sense gratification and everything, but they don't have a clue. They don't have a clue as to how we can cooperate for peace, friendship and prosperity with a common cause. They don't have an idea, right? And so here is the situation. Imagine there is a plague going on in Gainesville. Big plague. Imagine. And you have the medicine for it. And you're sitting at home while the plague rages. Are you responsible for deaths? We Vaishnavas are sitting with the medicine, the holy name and the Srimad Bhagavatam, for a plague that's ravaging the planet Earth. Manda Shumanda Mataya, people's intelligence are lost. And what we have can cure the problem. The proof of the concept is right here in this room. Look at yourself, each and every one of you. Your lives were transformed with the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yes or no? So the revolution began within. It's already started. You may be having a great time, but sorry, you've already voted in. There's no way you can now get out. Have you heard of the song Hotel California? You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. Welcome to the Hotel California. So once you have come and told Bhagavan Sri Krishna, Lord, I am yours, He will rope you in a revolution that will first cleanse your heart, Cheta Darpana Marjanam. It will solve the burning sensation that you experience every day in your mind when you go and engage, whether you're working at Krishna house or office, everybody's suffering. Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapamanam. Right? And then the solution, the blessing, starts manifesting in your life. Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam. If you've taken a japa walk on a full moon night, you know it's very pleasing. It's very healing. So you cannot heal others unless you have healed yourself. Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam. And if you are sitting with too much knowledge in your head, and I can tell you, I'm a professor and professors cannot dance. Right? You can try this out at the University of Florida. They will probably never have me back on campus if they knew that this idea came from me. But organize a dance concert for professors, see how awkward it gets in 5 minutes. Because there is so much knowledge on their shoulder and they're thinking so much, they cannot be like that. Look at that. Pictured there. You know the person in the middle, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? He was a professor of grammar and logic. No other professors in his town could dance. The first thing he did when he saw the condition of the world, he said, okay, I have done enough books, now let me go out, let me get people to sing and dance. Because remember, during Mahaprabhu's time, the three kingdoms, and we spoke about it when I gave the Advaita Acharya class, if you remember, the Delhi Sultanate, the Bengali Shahi dynasty and the Uriya Gajapati dynasty were all at wars with each other. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was traveling back and forth between three enemy countries, having had the two most important ministers of his own country join his movement, Rupa Sanatan Goswamis. They know how the country works. And he said, you quit your government job, you come with me. We have a revolution to start. And you know how he started the revolution? You might never have seen this, but I wanted to get a little string. It's not a Brahmin thread. Do you see what it looks like? You see the knots? Huh? This is the kind of japamala that Mahaprabhu used. Rupa Goswami says in his 5th Chaitanyashtaka, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu tied little knots on a string that he would wear around his waist or around his shoulders, and he would chant Hare Krishna on these incessantly. This is how the revolution began. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that once upon a time, says the Srimad Bhagavatam, various powerful kings amassed weapons and were arranged in military arrangements, ready to fire their weapons at the slightest provocation. There were the Andhakas, the Vrishnis, the Yadavas, and they were all like, slightest provocation, somebody sneezes, somebody's head goes off. Is that? Yeah. Somebody hears a voice in the sky, his sister goes to jail for the next 25 years. You don't know, there is no law in the land. Somebody decides, oh, I must create the Las Vegas of ancient India. No, they didn't think like that, but that's what they eventually did. Narakasura, he was going around kidnapping women, and he started the largest brothel India ever knew. Right? 16,000 women were kidnapped and put into flesh trade. And Sri Krishna said nothing doing. And he went and he fought and he killed this guy. But the material world is that when you create one solution, that creates a new problem. And so now all these women came to Sri Krishna and said, thank you, but what happens to us now? This guy was a criminal, but at least, there was some law and order. Krishna said, go home. He said, we can't. Society will never accept us. We are fallen, we are prostitutes. We are so far away from home. We have led a life that I don't think we can ever get back. Krishna said, who said you are prostitutes? You are my queens. And he went and married all 16,000 of them. That is how Sri Krishna got 16,108 wives. And he gave them a beautiful apartment each in Dwarka. And he expanded himself. He had children with anybody who wanted. Right? And created a family which was a massive dynasty. And at the end of the day, he wasn't attached to his family. Because when he saw that they were breaking the 4 legs of dharma, satya, saucha, tapa and daya, he said, okay, it's time for them to go. Even they are a burden on earth. So Sri Krishna himself started a revolution where he was the kingmaker. The biggest empire of his day, the Kuru kingdom, was not moving a single inch without his permission. Everybody knew that. Right? And he made sure there is law and order in the country. This is why Srimad Bhagavatam starts with, now that Sri Krishna has departed, what will happen to dharma? And he says, no, don't worry. Dharma will exist in the form of this book, Srimad Bhagavatam, and keep guiding people. For this book is non-different from Sri Krishna himself. What Sri Krishna established continued to stay after his physical departure in the form of this book. And what does this book teach? We must understand the present need of human society. That's where it starts. Sri Krishna taught the same thing. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught the same thing. In Sri Krishna's time, Krishna had to pick up a weapon. In Mahaprabhu's time, this was the weapon. And this is the weapon he gave us. Right? So if we sincerely chant the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Mahamantra, that cleansing, that revolution will start beginning inside. How many of us remember the 2008 Obama campaign? All of you must have been much, much younger like I was. I was teaching a class at the University of Chicago. I was a professor there in one department. And I was coming back home, 8 p.m. at night, and suddenly the traffic wasn't moving. Obama had won the election. I found myself stuck in the middle of that historic speech. Right? I hadn't planned it. He became the president, came on the stage and was standing right in front of him. Like, wow. And I noticed the whole crowd was chanting 3 words. Yes, we can. They're like a robot. Yes, we can. This is secular japa. They don't know what they're doing. But human beings have this power to repeat words that are meaningful to them again and again and again till their whole life gets oriented based on that thing that they're chanting. The Hare Krishna mantra is very simple. Sri Krishna calls Radha Hare, but all the Brajavasis think Krishna is Hari and therefore they call him Hare. Balaram is known as Ram, but sometimes Sri Radha is also said to have called Sri Krishna Ram because a man who knows how to make others happy is Ram. And a person in which the yogi's delight is also called Ram. Because yogis delight in Sri Krishna, Krishna is also Ram. So depending on who you are, if you are Hanuman, you will think of Ram as Lord Ram. If you are Mother Yashoda, you will think of Ram as Balaram. Right? So the Hare Krishna mantra is a combination of Krishna's beautiful names, the most esoteric names. That will change its flavor depending on who you are. And by chanting, you will recognize yourself. And once you've seen your own face in the mirror inside, there is no turning back. You cannot unsee it. That's where the revolution starts. And once that happens, Cheta Darpana Marjanam, Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapamanam, Sreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam, Vidyavadu Jivanam, Anandam Vudivardhanam. That's when you engage joyfully in the revolution. Some devotees come and tell me, I have so much difficulty chanting my 16 rounds. Well, maybe you need to take a chill pill, step back and understand why you're chanting those 16 rounds. It's like someone saying, I have so much difficulty taking medicines. My friend, that is what is going to stop your suffering. The fact that we are allowed to chant the 16 rounds is our privilege. And why 16? Why stop at 16? You chant as many rounds as you can, because there's so much trash in our minds. Only this thing can cleanse it before you're ready for the revolution. Because revolution begins. But why do you keep chanting? The explanation, because it looks like a mindless repetitive activity. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare. So one friend called, why do you become human drones? In Adi Purana, it is said that Ratanti, one must just keep repeating this, right? And Jiva Goswami says, Adarena. Adarena means with a lot of love and affection. So if you're doing then there is no love and affection. If you are saying Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, and each time you say each word, you're inviting Krishna in your heart to cleanse it so that you're ready to serve him. Please engage me in your service. That's what it means. Don't rush through it because it won't work. That is Namabhasha, a reflection of the name. But once you get to the platform of the pure name, Nayanam Galada Srudharaya Vadanam Gadgada Ruddhaya Gira, these things will happen. Tears will flow from your eyes because you suddenly realize what is it that you received. It's like a beggar suddenly receiving a $500 million lottery. Right? Life will change. If you are a beggar on the street and you get a $500 million lottery, will you remain a beggar on the street? Each one of us are born as beggars on the street. But we receive, by the grace of Guru and Krishna, the holy names and Srimad Bhagavatam and the association of Vaishnavas. Those are the three medicines that works like a lottery. Two metaphors in one sentence. Right? And once you receive it, once that brain gets cleared of the fog, and you realize, oh my God, I have been crying over broken glass and I have a Kohinoor in my hand here. Right? Then you will not look at your life in the same way. Until that day this message doesn't fully resonate, you will feel sleepy during japa and katha. right? So then it's better to start at your own level. Just to, when you take medicine, it's a minimum effective dose. If you have too much, you will overdose. If you don't have anything, it won't work. But minimum effective dose, little bit every day. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. For those who have not taken their vows yet, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, chant at least 4 rounds every day. Don't keep your mala fasting. Because japa means you're putting food in your mala. It's like feeding, every time feeding a baby. And he says, don't keep your mala fasting. At least 4 rounds every day. Right? And when this happens, gradually, one day, you will begin to develop love for the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. You will see who Sri Krishna was. And Sri Krishna, if you look at his life, he says, Manushim Tanu Ashrita, means I am in a human body. Krishna gets a headache. And during the Mahabharata war, when an arrow scrapes him, he bleeds. Right? But even in the middle of all of that, he is Bhagavan Swayam, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why? Because he is not, Krishna apparently must have had a balance sheet somewhere. He's the king of Dwarka. Dwarka had its own economy. If you look at the Srimad Bhagavatam, I think 10th canto, chapter, I forget, where Krishna's daily activities are reported. The farmers are producing stuff like clothes and grain, and he is giving cows in charity. So there is an economy. And the Kuru economy is much bigger than the Yadu economy. Right? So money-wise, in the pocket, Krishna's wallet is smaller than Yudhishthir Maharaj's. But Sri Krishna acts in such a way that all wealth belongs to him, because it does. And how do we know? Even Yudhishthir Maharaj's wealth gets spent in the way Krishna wants. Everybody's wealth gets spent in a way Sri Krishna wants. Even if you hated Krishna, you would know him. There is no way you could ignore Krishna. You could hate him, you could love him, but there's no way you could ignore him. So he has all fame. Right? It is said that he used to stand crooked. Tribhanga Lalita Sundara. Sometimes, sometimes his gait was a little effeminate by today's standard. But everybody saw beauty even in that crookedness. All beauty. There was nothing that Sri Krishna did not know. All knowledge. There was nothing that he couldn't do. When Jarasandha suddenly attacked him, I think 18th time, and then Krishna turns to Uddhava and says, Uddhava, now what do I do? And he's the strongest man. He could just gone there and given a tight punch. No. Krishna turns to Uddhava and says, Uddhava, what do I do? The strength of Sri Krishna is the love of his devotees. He has all strength that way. And at the end of the day, he is totally detached. Whether he wins the war or he loses the war, it doesn't matter. And he tells the same thing to Arjuna. Arjuna, it doesn't matter if I win the war or lose it. You fight the war for a good cause. If you win, at the end, good will win. Your job is to do your duty. Uphold dharma. Dharma rakshati rakshita. If you protect dharma, dharma will protect you. Dharma is the ultimate security system for the collectivity of all life on this planet. All the good qualities that you get in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam begin with those 4 good qualities. Satya, Saucha, Tapa and Daya. Right? These are what Srila Prabhupada calls the 4 regulative principles. In America, because people did not understand these abstract concepts back in the day of the hippie movement, Vietnam War, it was much more specific. No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex. Otherwise, people will think, these are broad principles, I can interpret it however I want. He knew that. What is meat eating? When you commit violence that causes physical pain to another living being for your sustenance, that's violence. But you will say plants are also being killed. They are also, yes. But causing the minimum violence possible to sustain your life. And the gold standard is not eating anything that is born from a mother that has potential to life. So eggs, because it has potential to life, you're artificially keeping the rooster separate so that you can enjoy the egg. Otherwise, it would have been alive. So meat, fish, eggs, that's the basic. Because it has potential to life. Milk, on the other hand, after calves drink, if you drink, it's not a problem. Anything that has potential to life and is born from a mother, if you cause violence to it, you are hitting at the root of the principle of compassion. You are helping Kali chop off that one leg of dharma by your activity. If there is any form of sex where there is shame, there is guilt, there is rush, and if sex is not meant for procreation, and I know some people have a problem with that, but it is not a principle of sex only for procreation, it's the mindset that if I am engaging sexually with some person, I should be open to the possibility that there will be a child, and if the child appears, I will take responsibility and raise the child well. That is licit sex. And Krishna says, Dharma avariddha kamosmi. That kind of sex, I am. Illicit sex is the opposite. And 8 kinds of marriages are listed in Shastra, divided into 3 categories: Sattvic, Rajasic, Tamasic. If 2 people fall in love, it's considered Gandharva marriage. In India, you do not have the concept of marriage and divorce. Once you're married, you're married. You might be married to multiple people. The law allowed that, right? But you have to take responsibility and you have to be fair and equal to everybody. You cannot play favorites. But that is licit sex. So once that is practiced, if you don't practice this, then you are butchering off the leg of cleanliness from the bull of dharma. And then gambling, being irresponsible with our resources, whether it's our money, whether it's our time, whether it's our relationships, gambling destroys everything. So if you do that, you are hitting at the leg of austerity, tapa. Because it takes a lot of time and effort to bring together any resource. This house was not bought for free. The food we eat costs something. But if instead of putting our food in the mouth, we are trying to put food in our ear, it won't work. So if we are using our time, energy, resources in a way that is irresponsible, that is gambling. And gambling destroys tapa. And the 4th leg is tottering, which is satya. Yes. You will not be able to think clearly. And then some people say intoxication destroys tapa and gambling destroys satya. Those two keep kind of changing categories, but it's essentially the same. So the 4 regulative principles is the basis of this entire process of Krishna consciousness. And the system of meditation, and I'll finish with this. At the end of the day, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, or even if you don't say Vaishnavism, the teachings of Sri Krishna ultimately says that revolution begins inside. Once you start practicing this particular system of meditation, we're not sitting, standing, breathing, all of that. There is no particular activity, but every living moment of your life is an act of meditation. Sitting and listening to this katha in a class, Shravanam, it is meditation. If you go out on campus, you're serving food, you say hello, you start a conversation, that is kirtanam, that is meditation. In this way, there are 9 forms of meditation. And what does this meditation do? It totally rewires your brain. It restructures your identity. When people take initiation, they get a new name. You know why? Because their old identity is now crumbling away. They are a das, a servant of Sri Krishna in this movement. And then as the meditation intensifies, suddenly some things begin to appear in your life. Everything is auspicious. Bad things never happen. And apparently in the eyes of other people, they might say, oh, it's a bad thing that happened. I said, no. It appears to be bad, but it is good. Like Kunti Maharani says in the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto, every time there was a vipada, there was a danger, tatra tatra jagat guru, O Lord of the, O Master of the whole world, you appeared. Right? And so let these dangers come again and again, because you will appear again and again. And at the end of the day, this meditation is what is Krishna Sankirtanam, and Mahaprabhu says, Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. There is nothing on this earth that will actually solve the problems that you're trying to solve, except this. If you're trying anything else, it will work temporarily, but it will not work in the long run. Because if you try to do a revolution in the world outside without first starting a revolution within, your revolution is bound to fail. This is why Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told Srila Prabhupada, your Gandhian movement will fail. It doesn't work like that. But here is a time-tested formula that has worked on the surface of planet Earth for the last 5,700 years. Every generation has its crisis, and this book has come into use. And that is why every generation has a commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur wrote it, Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote it, Baladev Vidyabhushan wrote it, Srila Prabhupada wrote it. And as our generations progress, many others will write it. Except it has to be written within the purview of the parampara. Because books with great ideas have a tendency to be exploited. So we have to, as we come together as Vaishnavas, I humbly request you to consider this book as the constitution of the planet Earth, that worries about the collectivity of all lives on this planet. This might sound very big, but every meal you serve in Krishna lunch is helping with that cause. Every spoon of food you put on someone's plate, you're drawing them closer to Krishna and his movement. Okay? Are we out of time? Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. I don't know how long this class goes.
We're good. We have maybe 10 minutes more.
Okay, I'll happily answer any questions. Yes.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for that class. I guess in this sentence that it's written, Srimad Bhagavatam will fill this need, for it is a cultural presentation for the spiritualization of the entire human society.
Yes.
What is it meant by cultural presentation?
Cultural presentation means every major value must be preserved in a culture. That we have certain fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution, right? Or life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness exists within American culture. So American culture contains that value. There are certain values that are preserved by certain cultures. The culture of Bharatavarsha, land of India, preserves and presents a certain culture. That we are not the master, we are the servant. Atmendriya Pritivancha Tar Nam Kam. If you are thinking in a self-centered way, you are damaging the planet. If you have been born in this land and you have this knowledge, Bharat Bhumite Manushya Janmo Jar Janmo Sharthak Kori Karo Paro Upokar. If you were born in this land of India or Bharata, the word Bharata means a land that is engaged in illuminated knowledge. Bhaskar Gyani Ratojai Desh. Bhaskar means shining, Gyan means knowledge. A country that is engaged in shining knowledge. That's what Bharata means. Another meaning of Bharata. Bharata Bhumite Manushya Janmo Jar Janmo Sharthak Kori Karo Paro Upokar Jare Dekho Tare Kaho Krishna Upodesh Amar Aggaye Guru Hoiya Taro Ei Desh. Shuno Shuno Nityananda Shuno Haridas Sarvatra Amar Agga Karo Prakash Shakol Dare Dare Giya Karo Ei Bhikkha Bolo Krishna Bhajo Krishna Karo Krishna Shikkha. What does this mean? If you have this knowledge, it is your responsibility to help others with this knowledge. How do you do that? By giving them the advice of Sri Krishna, Krishna Upadesh. Not everybody is going to accept Krishna as God, that's fine. Even if they think of Krishna as a great politician, no problem. But the advice that Sri Krishna gives is relevant for these people. Give it to them. It will stop their suffering. And then he calls Nityananda and Haridas, the two chief people in his team, that you go and share this message with as many people as you can. Go from door to door and beg. Speak about Krishna. Bolo Krishna. Follow the path of Krishna. Bhaja Krishna. Teach each other this knowledge from Sri Krishna. That is how you can benefit them. Does that answer your question? Does that answer your question? Yeah, and yes. Whoever wants to go first. Ladies first.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you for such an amazing class, especially meditating on just like the historical context and what Srila Prabhupada was living through, what he was going through was really incredible. I have just a small question. You know, we hear there's so many interviews with Prabhupada's one son who was there to send him off when he went to America.
Vrindavan Chandra Prabhu.
Yeah, he was so proud of him. But do we know what happened to the other 6 children?
There are 3 daughters who were married. One son went mentally insane. One son filed a lawsuit against ISKCON because he said, this is my father's property, so I must inherit it. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj had to fight a lawsuit. And Prabhupada knew that this is going to happen. So he put the checks and balances in place so that the movement does not become his son's property. Vrindavan Chandra Prabhu was a nice Vaishnav. I met him. His daughters had other children. He left his home under very difficult circumstances, right? The question of tea was not just about a regulatory principle. It was an ideological difference. Drinking of tea meant you are supporting the British. The British brought tea. It was a luxury good. Indians did not need it in the middle of so much poverty and difficulty. And Srila Prabhupada was tea or me. Do you even care about what I am doing, what I am giving my life to? I believe in a certain ideology and I'm living my life for that, and you happen to care the least about it. Do I have any support here? And basically his wife said no. I said fine. Then if I ever have opportunity, I will provide what I can, but I've done my best. My children have grown up. They can take care of you. I'm leaving. Right? And so that middle son had a lot of misgivings. That why did father leave and take sannyas? You know, when poverty enters to the door, love goes out of the window. And Srila Prabhupada was a successful businessman till the war broke out. And he saw poverty that we wish on no one. He saw a lot of poverty. And in the middle of this poverty with all these children, you know, he managed, and we have to give him credit for that. So, you know, none of these children tell that story, but once you look at the wider context of Srila Prabhupada's life, we realize that, you know, he was a great dad. Huh? Does that address your question? Do you want to ask, and Bhakta Max, and then I can come back to you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for giving a very inspiring class. My question is how we can continue to cultivate that the revolution begins within. How we can maintain that.
We start with one day at a time. Just one day at a time. Because tomorrow you can join the revolution and you can get injured in battle. You're glorious if that happens, but that also means that you're no longer, you know, part of the action. So this is not a revolution in Rajagun, where you are out on the streets. You know, when people hear about revolution, they think Me Too, you know, placards, this, that, lot of hashtags. That's what they think about when they think about revolution. This is not that kind of revolution. It is one day at a time, preparing for the long haul. So how does it happen? You just take one 24-hour cycle at a time. And if you cannot, just take one 3-hour cycle at a time. 8 of those in a day. Right? You start from the morning. Take a Gauranga Prabhu, a dear friend and mentor, keeps saying that what you do between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. is very important. That decides what is going to happen between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. You have to be fully in control of your 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. schedule. Sleep well, eat well, dedicate that time to some spiritual activity, go to sleep with a certain peace of mind, wake up with a certain peace of mind, right? If you have dental health where you brush your teeth, your mental health is where you chant your japa, right? And in this way, when you take control of the small things, the big things fall into place. And you just keep at it every single day. Don't get discouraged. Many people will say many things. It might, Krishna will test your faith. Krishna will give you situations where you think, okay, I quit. But you can't quit. You can rest. Remember, you can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. So you might have a certain period of time where you go back and you get a job or whatever, and it's like, oh, I don't feel too Krishna conscious, that's fine. Someone came to me, a Prabhupada disciple, the first 15 years I did enormous devotional service, and then I had to go money. I said, I want to get back to this again. Will you teach me Shastra? I said, sure, we'll think about it. Right? So sometimes people fall away and then they come back. That's totally fine. But each one of us, no matter where we are and how we are, just taking care of one day at a time. Don't let your mala fast. Be compassionate in your food, in the clothes you wear. Be clean in your hygiene, in your relationships. Put in the best effort. Endure, tapa. Don't gamble your time away. The 4 regulative principles were not defined in the early days of ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada gave a list of things, says no frivolous sportive activities. If you look at the original list, what is not allowed in the ashram, no frivolous sporting activities. You say, oh, we can't play chess. You can play chess. But it's a waste of time unless you know how to use chess in a Krishna conscious way. If you play chess with somebody and that person becomes attracted to Krishna, by all means go and play chess. Seriously. If you want to read materials that are bhakti anukulo matro karjero shikar, bhakti pratikulo bhav varjan angikar. Whatever is favorable to bhakti, do it. Whatever is unfavorable, don't do it. Simple principle. If your relationship is actually taking you forward towards Krishna, by all means stay in that relation. If that relation is stopping you from Krishna, by all means get out of it. If the diet you are having creates a body that stops your service to Sri Krishna, stop it. If you need something in your diet that is going to enhance your devotional service, do it. If your laptop or your phone takes you away from Krishna, it is better to not touch it more than 1 hour a day. But if it is taking you towards Krishna, bringing others towards Krishna, spend 24 hours, don't sleep. I'm not saying that. But does that make sense? And then we will finish. Yes. You wanted to say something else, right?
I just have one quick question. Just to know, how old was Srila Prabhupada's youngest child when he left?
He left, I think, 2017 or something. He was 80 something years old. He came for that 50 years of ISKCON festival. That's the last.
No. When Srila Prabhupada left home.
I have to do the math.
Didn't even 49, so it must be
His young son was very young,
10 or 12, something like that.
a little older.
He had a couple of daughters that were not yet married.
Yeah.
The oldest son must be like 50s.
Something. But the thing is, remember, India is, till the 40s, it's a war zone. In the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, it is still a war zone. There's war with China, war with Pakistan, new country, no economy, no opportunity, no credit. Every other day Hindus and Muslims are fighting and closing every shop down. So there wasn't much of a functional family in that political circumstance. But he still did his best. Yes.
briefly, thank you so much for class, it's wonderful. Briefly, you were talking about how we need to make sure our hearts are clean so that we can share, this message with others. And I'm just wondering, because sometimes my heart is not even close to clean, and I want to do some kirtan, I want to distribute books. So I was wondering if you could talk about how are we able to do Sankirtan when our hearts aren't even clean yet?
It doesn't have to be fully clean. If you have started the cleansing process, we can go and start helping others with their cleansing process. We are all cleaning. My heart isn't clean either, right? But I'm speaking. Why? To the extent our realization allows, we can speak. Don't go beyond your realization. That's it. If your realization is, at least Gainesville should go vegan, stick to that level. If your realization is, I can now meditate on Mahaprabhu's Leela 24/7, then So to the extent your heart is clean, that light will shine forth. And that light that shines forth, you cannot hide it. I have a 7-year-old. If sometimes a plane will go into the plane. When little kids, they see something exciting, they have to share it with everybody. I have seen so many planes, I've been on so many. I say, it's not exciting for me anymore. I know there is an airport close by, planes go back and forth. But for her, oh my God, that's her level of realization. There's a plane in the sky, oh my God, this is awesome. Right? So each one of us finds something very awesome about Krishna. To the extent we find that, our heart has been cleaned there. So whatever we have found, we must share. Because if you don't use it, you will lose it. Right? So if book distribution is your thing, fine. If making friends is your thing, fine. If simply sitting and listening to people is your thing, there can be therapists. They just sit and listen. They are also doing Krishna's service. Whatever, however your heart gets cleaned, it's like, can I smile if I didn't brush today morning? You are smiling. Even if you didn't, you can still smile. So even if your heart is not fully clean, you can still present Krishna. Krishna is, swayameva spuratyada. He is just self-effulgent. Does that answer your question? Any final comments, thoughts? Sorry, if I was forceful today when I spoke, it's the news on TV that kind of completely bewilders me. I don't know if you've been watching the news. Oh, then you wouldn't understand. That is my context. I've been seeing house after house, neighborhood after neighborhood, people just walking in and shooting innocent people. People in the middle of their dinners and lunches, randomly being shot, babies being put into ovens. There is madness going on right now. Madness, utter madness. In China, there is another new wave of COVID. And they are being more brutal to the people there than the last time. Right? Economies around the world are beginning to show signs of such heating that when it crumbles, it's going to be hard on everyone. And we are partying in a house with a ticking time bomb. And we have the solution, but I think, at least I must think harder on how to implement it in the world so that at least a few more lives are saved. There is some more sanity. And as that passage says, we can become one in peace, friendship, and prosperity with a common cause. Thank you very much. After this, I can be here for a few minutes if you want to come and speak on an individual basis. But thank you for patiently sitting through. I hope at least 5% of the message resonated. And I'm very grateful that you are giving your lives to Mahaprabhu Sankirtan movement. Nityananda Prabhu was a revolutionary. Mahaprabhu was a revolutionary. In their time, they blew people's minds. Big time. right? The biggest leaders and thinkers of society couldn't even begin to fathom that how could the path of peace and love and music and song and dance actually bring end to war and combine life as they knew it in peace, friendship and prosperity with the common cause. Mahaprabhu proved it, right? And each of these acharyas after Mahaprabhu, they all showed it through their personal example that this is possible, right? And now their movement is in the hands of you. This movement is now in your hands. Okay, remember Srila Prabhupada was once like a Krishna house member in the Gaudiya Math. If he saw, oh, everybody else is so big, I'm just such a small person, I can never do this. No. To the extent I am ready, I must do it. And he went out. So, please, this movement is in your hands. This is a very serious movement. It can positively affect millions and millions of lives. Each one of us in this room can transform the lives of thousands of people out there if we just begin to start caring spiritually for ourselves. If we start the revolution within. You've already started it. You've already come a long way. You're under the expert guidance of someone like Kalakanta Prabhu, Mahatma Prabhu, many other senior devotees here. Not everybody might have the sight on this movement as a revolution. Things can get routine and boring. But if you remember that all military has to go through boring training so that they are ready for combat anytime. That's your role. The morning program, the Bhagavatam class, the seva that you do, Vaishnava association is your training so that you can be a part of this movement at any given time. And to the extent you are ready, go out and give it. There is no loss. No matter what you do, as long as you stick to the principles of the book, don't make anything up, don't speculate. Everything that you need is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam. All the answers you need is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? And I may or may not be here. It was great to spend a year in Gainesville. If I continue living here, I'll probably see you again. If not, I might visit from time to time. But my time here is over in June, middle of June. But this message, other people will come and speak. But what I said today, I prepared this class as if I'm never going to see you again. So everything I had to say, I have said. This is the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. If you simply follow the four regulatory principles, chant Hare Krishna, and take shelter in this book, accept it as the constitution of your life and the constitution of the planet, you can never go wrong. You can never ever go wrong. Okay? That's all I have to say. Thank you. Krishna House Ki.